Hello and welcome to Intoxicated Masculinity. We've got another tasting video coming at you today. It's a little bit different today. Usually we do a blind tasting to try several different kinds of liquors or liqueurs to try and figure out which one's our favorite. We've been doing a little bit about Amaros lately over on the cocktail side of things, and I thought we'd sort of bring that over here. So each one of us has picked an Amaro, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, and we're going to each sample it, and then we're each going to present a cocktail that features that Amaro. So the reason we're not doing it blindly is it would just be very difficult for us to blindly make cocktails. We would spill things all over the place. I don't think that would be, well, it might be fun for you to watch. It wouldn't be fun to clean up afterwards. So let's go ahead and introduce the Amaros we're talking. Let's first introduce the Amaros we're talking about, and then let's taste them and see what our first impressions are.
All right, these are the three Amaros that we have chosen. Mike?
I picked Averna. It is a Sicilian Amaro that dates back to about 1868, although the recipe apparently goes back even farther than that. It isn't, these are all going to come on a different bitterness scale. This is definitely going to be on the lower end of the bitterness scale.
All right. I went with Montenegro. Montenegro was invented by a guy who was going to be a priest, and then he decided to make liquor instead. And it's called the Liquor of the Virtue. And I find that appealing because I find Stoicism appealing. Brandon.
Liquor of the Virtue. And I picked what looks like Cynar, but it's actually pronounced Cynar. It's 16.5% alcohol by volume. It's about 13 herbs and spices, and it's supposed to be a little bittersweet.
Okay.
Is it the Colonel's special recipe?
It could be, yeah.
I knew that was coming. Okay.
All right, let's, should we maybe drink these?
Let's do a taste.
Yeah.
Want to start off with
Sure.
these?
I'll take the big
We'll
ones.
try
Don't
the
pour too much.
Cynar. Typically you wouldn't be doing this, but we
Not
wanted to
terribly
be
good. I know some people like the drunken
sure of the
botanist.
character of each beverage. So.
Saying drink it straight.
That's actually not bad.
It's real bitter on the end, though.
Yeah,
Real
that's very true. You don't taste the bitterness immediately. You taste the bitterness right at the end.
You can see the sweet part too. It's not
Yeah.
straight
Yeah,
bitter.
it's like, hey, how's it going? And then, pah!
I could definitely see sipping this.
Yeah.
I think it's something you would have to acquire.
If you hate yourself, yeah.
You would have to acquire. I don't think you sip it right out of the bottle right away. But once you're used to it, I could definitely see sipping this.
The book, The Drunken Botanist, which have been going through, is saying that try them straight. It's a good way to do it. And
Okay.
so far, that's really not bad.
Yeah, it definitely does have. And Kill put the nail on the head. That bitterness just comes right at the end, and it's strange because there's like a good couple of seconds there where you almost don't even think it's going to be bitter, and then it's just like all of a sudden, no, really bitter.
Well, one of the cocktails I picked,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry. One of the cocktails I tried but ended up not making for this one has honey in it, so it kind of combines this bitterness with the sweetness of the honey, and it's pretty good, but I wasn't sure it was right for this one, so we're going to go with one that was on the bottle here.
Okay. Would you want? Or me? Okay. We'll try the Montenegro.
I like to be last.
Yes, once again, Brandon's olfactory senses have failed us again.
That's pretty good too.
It's very.
It's almost like candy.
Yeah. It's like the candy coating, like a candy shell type of thing.
Is there like pine? There's like an herb. There's like an herbal nature to it.
Yeah.
But is that
Like
the
gardening.
Cynar in the
No. That's very definitely that. That's
Is
like
that licorice?
I'm not sure. I taste like.
Like black licorice, I think. Because what it reminds me of, it tastes like an old world candy. Like an old style candy.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm definitely getting a fair amount of. There's very little bitter on that. It is.
Oh yeah, it's
There
way
is.
different than this.
I think there is some bitter on it, but not very much at all. And I have heard a lot of sort of bartenders talk about how Amaro Montenegro is a good sort of introduction to Amaros because it isn't going to kill you with that bitter. It's not like trying, a Campari or something like that, where it just kind of pulls you over right off the bat. Or a Fernet Branca, which is another one that's very, very, effective. All right, Averna from Sicily with Love. There's not a whole lot on the nose.
Man, all three of these are way different.
That is a trait of Amaro. Would you care to embellish?
Okay, first of all, that's very good. I like that a lot.
That's probably the best one out of the three. If you're going to sip them straight.
Okay, this is very much in the middle between those two as far as bitterness goes. There is definitely some bitterness on this, but it's not overpowering. Now, as far as the Amaros, the thing that can be very confusing about them is a lot of us come from, the bourbon world or champagne or tequila or rum or a lot of these other
Beer.
things. Or beer, where there's, beer less so, where there's a lot of very specific rules as far as like, this is what this is. If you want to be a bourbon, you have to fulfill all these rules. Amaros basically have no rules. If you are a liqueur that is sweet and or bitter, you can be an Amaro. Amaros will typically come from Italy, but they by no means have to. There are tons of, we've got Sosa, which isn't included in this tasting, but that is a French Amaro. There is, if anybody's familiar with Malort, which we will probably talk more about in a future date, is technically an American Amaro, which some people would describe as vomit, which is a fair description. So Amaros can basically come from anywhere. It's a very loose definition, and so it provides for an interesting tasting.
I was just going to quick note here, a couple of tasting notes on the Averna for me. It seems like, the bitterness that you talk about, the bitterness of the Cynar was like, it just like attacked my tongue, whereas the bitterness of that, it just kind of sits on the end of your tongue. And I'm definitely getting like coffee notes out of that. It would be a good dessert beverage, I think.
It actually, when you say coffee, I was trying to think. It reminded me of like pancake syrup with a little bit of bitterness. I could see it, pancakes and coffee.
For this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, breakfast then.
Well, I mean, it's
You
never.
heard it here first.
You can't drink all day unless you start in the morning. All right, so now we are going to talk about our cocktail and then make that cocktail and then drink those cocktails, which is, of course, my favorite part. All right, so the first cocktail we're going to do tonight is with my Amaro, which is Averna from Sicily. The cocktail is going to be the Black Manhattan, which was invented in Bourbon and Banter in San Francisco in 2007. There's not a lot of complexity to this. It's basically a takeoff on a Manhattan. We're using the Averna, so we're going to up the sweetness and up the bitterness a little bit in that. Normally we'd be putting this in a coupe glass like this, but since we're going to be doing a tasting of it, we're actually just going to be putting it in a couple of tasting glasses. So, now that we know a little bit about the cocktail, let's go ahead and make it. Alright, so you want to start off with your mixing glass. Anytime you're doing a stirred cocktail, shaken cocktail too, you really want to put as much ice in there as you can. I know some people think that's going to add too much dilution. It's actually going to do the opposite. It's going to chill the entire environment down and keep your dilution to a minimum. So, start off with our Averna. We're going to do 1 ounce. So again, this is just going to be a Manhattan where we're switching out a couple of ingredients. Now, the important thing here is I've switched up the the recipe actually calls for Wild Turkey 101. I'm going for OCD, which is from Glens Creek Distillery down in Kentucky, which, if you guys haven't been there, what's wrong with you? It's a great little distillery. It's right next to Castle and Key. The reason I'm switching it up is Wild Turkey is going to bring some spice. In this particular Manhattan, I want to make sure we keep the sweetness up. And so we're going to switch out the rye bourbon for a much, well, this is a rye bourbon too, but it's much sweeter rye bourbon. All right, so we're going to do 2 ounces of our bourbon. All right, and this calls for 1 dash of your orange bitters. Just toss that right in there. And 1 dash of your Angostura. Now, you're going to garnish this with a cherry. In this case, again, we're not doing the coupe. We're going to do some tasting glasses. But I cannot recommend the Luxardo Maraschino cherries enough. They are delicious. and you will not be sorry to put those in. So once again, as I say in our cocktail videos, I'm going to grab at the bottom, so you're keeping track of what the temperature of the mixing glass is. Your mixing is all going to be done with your fingers. You're holding with your thumb and your forefinger, and you're mixing with your other ones. You want to keep the back of that spoon right against the back of the inside of the mixing glass. Once you think you've got the proper dilution and cooling, what you can do is take a little straw, just cover that up. I think that tastes about right. Now, in this cocktail, you'd probably be okay to just strain it, but myself, I kind of always prefer to double strain. You're always going to get your stray little ice pieces that can sneak in there. We don't want to do that. So we're going to give everybody their little pour. You always got to even everything out, especially when you're OCD like me. All right, I think we got that together pretty well. Let's bring the guys back in, taste this, and see what we think. All right, so now that we made these things, let's see what it tastes like. All right. So I actually kind of like it. The one thing is you're getting. Kale feels less so, apparently.
Not a fan.
So. I think the problem here is I had not tried Averna before we'd done this tasting. And on our initial sort of sampling of these, the Averna definitely came off a lot sweeter than I expected it to, which is why I switched to a sweet bourbon for this cocktail. So it is definitely a sweet cocktail, and I think the Averna gets a little bit lost in it.
For me, that's definitely, like, it's all bourbon. Again, my taste buds don't work real well, but I'm not picking up the Averna really at all.
Now, I give it a second sip because I'm going to give it a fair day. I'm definitely getting the bourbon. There's some pepper there, the sweetness. I was kind of expecting a little coffee from the Averna, but I'm not really getting that. It's mostly melded by or covered up rather by the bourbon itself.
This is also a very oaky bourbon, and I think a lot of that oak is coming through as well.
And I do like oaky bourbons, but maybe not in this.
I think that, so I actually switched out, as I said before, from a Wild Turkey 101 to the OFC, which OFC, by the way, this is not a commentary on OFC, it's a great bourbon. But I think in this particular cocktail, a little bit more of a pepperiness, so like a Wild Turkey or a Four Roses probably would have been a better choice. Now, let's see what Kale's got for us.
You can see that.
Get my stuff. All right, the cocktail I've chosen is called Stranger in the Alps. Typically, the Amaro that I would be using in this is Braulio, and that is actually from 1826. Francesco Poloni was a pharmacist and a botanist, and he used the herbs of Borneo. However, as I said previously, I will be using the Montenegro because unfortunately I could not find the Braulio in my local area, and that is okay because it's cocktails, not rocket science, and we can change things around to our own liking. Also, speaking on that same note, is our Douglas Fir brandy, which I did not get. Instead, I'm using this Spanish brandy and substituting some lavender bitters because I think that's going to complement this cocktail very well. Then we have our gin. This is actually an interesting gin to me. It's called gunpowder gin because it has gunpowder in it, and that's interesting. And then we have our vermouth, our Antica vermouth, our Campari, which is also an Amaro, and I will tell you more about that later. And that's when our Montenegro goes in, and then we're going to add a dash of salt, and we're going to finish with a lemon. All right, let's go ahead and make this cocktail. So like I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our brandy. Now, typically what you want to do with a swirl is just put it into your rock glass, swirl it, remove the excess. In this case, we're not doing that because I'm mixing all these into one drink, so I am going to just use a bar spoon. A little generous there. Of brandy. As I said, I'm going to accent that with a dash of lavender bitters because I think that will be quite appealing in this. All right, now we need 1.5 ounces of our gunpowder gin. Don't worry, it's not going to explode. Ounce. 1 ounce of our vermouth, Antica vermouth. It is a sweet vermouth, but it's a very specific kind of sweet vermouth, so you might want to keep that in mind. You can't just, well, yeah, you can. You can just throw a sweet vermouth in there, because like I said, it's cocktails, not rocket science. Do your own thing. So we got 1 ounce of our vermouth here. Straight in the glass. And then we have 3/4 of an ounce of Campari. And oddly enough, the main focus of this cocktail that we've been talking about in this episode is actually the least of what we're putting in here. So 1/4 ounce of our Amaro. Not sure I'm a big fan of the design of this bottle. And a pinch of salt. Seems like a pinch. Now I'll attempt to stir this in the correct manner. Glass is feeling pretty chilled. Oh, while I'm mixing this, I wanted to do to point out a couple of things. The Campari is an Amaro itself, so actually this has 2 Amaros in it. That's an interesting fun fact for you. And as I said before, as we have things set up here, the mise en place, it's always good to keep that in mind. And I think that's about chilled. So we're going to go ahead and strain this. I'm not going to double strain it because I don't feel it's necessary. And 1. And 2. And 3. That'll be mine. That's fine. I'm generous. All right, so we're done with that. Now, I'll take my lemon peel. What Mike likes to do with his lemon peel is he gives it a little heat and then he gives it a spritz and burns that oil, that citrus oil in the air so you can see what's actually happening, why he's doing that. What I'm gonna do is just a little more old school. I'm just gonna twist that right over. Now typically what I would do is if this was in the rocks glass, I would take it and I'd rim the glass with that citrus oil so you get that flavor in there. I'm gonna set this aside for now and then we're gonna go ahead and have a tasting. Okay, let's go ahead and see what this does.
Aside from get you drunk.
Look at this dude.
I really like that. It's very kind of it's bitter because the Campari. So the Campari is definitely the bitter ingredient here. But you know, the sweetness is coming through. Yeah, I'm trying to pick out the flavors. The Campari is probably the thing that comes through the most.
It's like a grapefruit wrapped in flowers.
That's not a bad description, actually.
A little pepper on the end too.
Yeah, that's the gin. That's definitely the gin. Because I think this comes from. Well, I'm not 100% sure.
Gin's also aromatic because of the juniper berries they use. That's kind of the whole theme of this drink. It's all very aromatic. It's not just you're drinking this into your mouth. You're living this experience.
It's very herbal.
It opens up very bright and sweet.
It's
okay. So for the third one, I too am making a version of a Manhattan. A Manhattan is normally whiskey, bitters, vermouth. This one is going to go with my Cynar. We're going to have sweet vermouth, Cynar, and some rye whiskey added to it. And it normally goes into a coupe glass. Of course, for this one, we're not doing that. We're just going to mix it up, put it into 3 little glasses so everybody can taste it, see what we think. Okay, so I tested out a couple other cocktails, and there were some good ones, but this one comes right here on the bottle, so I figured I'd go with this one. This is it, Cynar Manhattan. So the first thing we got is half an ounce of Cynar. Ooh, got a little bit too much. And according to our bottle, we've got 2 ounces of rye. There it goes. All right. Then we got 3/4 of an ounce of red vermouth. And then maraschino cherry. Again, since we're not putting it in the coupe glass and we're putting it into the 3 little glasses, I'm not going to do that. But for this cocktail, the cherry goes once you're done. I'm going to stir it up. I'll do a little tasting myself here. Alright. Out of the way. String. Alright. Let's see how this one tastes. Alright. I'm gonna give this one a shot.
I remember the Cynar being very bitter when we first tried it.
That is a high proof rye we put in there.
You know, I like it.
I like it too, but it's I don't know. I feel like it and the Cynar are fighting a little bit over who gets to be in charge of this cocktail.
As far as bitter versus pepper.
It's a bitter pepper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't run across that combination a whole lot in foods.
You know, I almost think that I should have put that rye in my Manhattan, and we should have put my bourbon in your Manhattan. Because I think the sweetness would temper the Cynar a little bit, and I think that Averna would have benefited from more pepper off of the rye.
Yeah, probably.
I like it. It's got the bitter and the pepper, but there's kind of a caramelness like the vanillas and stuff are coming through, and of course it's going to be peppery because it's a high rye bourbon.
Yeah.
But it's good. I mean, it's sweet.
This isn't a high rye
Bitter.
bourbon. This is a rye.
Okay, so this is just okay.
This
And
is just a rye.
so it's sweet, peppery, and bitter, and I think they dance particularly well together in this one.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would have changed is with how high proof this. And this is I don't know what's the proof on it. I think it's like 130. It's a very high proof bourbon.
Cask strength. It says 67%. Or no? Can you read that? I don't have my glasses on. Sorry.
Yeah, this is 67%, so that is 134 proof. So if you are going to use the 80 Laws Sea Rye, maybe go a little easier. Maybe go 1.5 ounces instead of full 2 ounces.
One of the things I always talk about is loss of the sense of smell, which also fits my taste buds, and me not being a subtle person in the first place, I have trouble tasting a lot of really subtle flavors. This is not this. This I can taste. This is putting it out there.
It's definitely strong. I think, yeah, I think even as somebody who likes barrel-proof spirits, this even comes off a little strong, even with the other stuff in there.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, moment of truth here. We've tried 3 different ones. Which one do you think that you would go for out of the 3?
Okay, that's a great question. Let's talk about that. All right, so we tried 3 Amaros, and those Amaros in cocktails. Before we talk about what our favorites were, I want to mention Amaro by Mr. Parsons. I mentioned him in a previous episode. The book Amaro is really good. It's very informative. It's also not a book that you necessarily have to read all the way through. He talks about the various types of Amaros and cocktails and stuff. It's just a nice little reference book. We'll put a link in below that if you want to grab that. So this is sort of different, I think, because normally we're talking about what was our favorite, what was our least favorite, and so on. Here we kind of got to do 2 levels. We tried these Amaros by themselves, and we had certain opinions of those, and then we made cocktails, and we had certain opinions of those. So let's start off with the Amaros themselves, and what do we think there?
Well, personally for me, I thought that the Averna was probably the best one. That was just a solo.
I'm going to go with Kale's.
Amaro Montenegro?
Montenegro, yes. I thought that one, as far as just sipping, I thought it was really good.
If I was a decent person, I would vote for the one that hadn't gotten any votes yet, but I'm not a decent person. I like the Averna. I thought it was great. I thought it was a really good balance of a little bit of bitter, but not so much bitter that it's kind of killing you. So I think the Averna was definitely, in my mind, the best of the Amaros to drink neat.
What do you think was the best cocktail?
So the best cocktail is totally different. If I was the same self-serving asshole that I was in voting for my favorite Amaro, I would vote for my cocktail. But the Black Manhattan, I did not care for. Don't blame the recipe so much because I used a sweeter bourbon, a sweeter, higher proof bourbon, whereas I think if I had used a higher rye bourbon, it was a little more peppery and maybe a slightly lower proof, I think that cocktail would have been a little bit better. But as they stood, the Black Manhattan, I think, was definitely number 3. Number 1, I think was the Amaro Montenegro one.
The Stranger in the Alps.
The Stranger in the Alps. Forgive me. It didn't do anything very big. It was kind of a low key kind of cocktail, and I don't know. I was kind of there for it. What do you think?
Well, not intending to be self-serving, but again, me being someone that requires more punch, a little less subtlety, I'm gonna go with mine. I thought the Cynar Manhattan that came labeled right on the bottle, that was really tasty. I thought it didn't pull any punches. You could taste everything that you were meant to taste, and that was really good.
You will definitely not walk away from that cocktail going, I couldn't really taste anything. You may not be able to taste anything after it, but
Right.
but definitely not before.
Separate.
I'll be honest here. I'm a little torn because I did honestly like your cocktail, Brandon. I thought it was good, but like Mike said, the cocktail that I made was a little more subtle. It was a little more easygoing. I feel like like your cocktail I would have if I was out with friends on a night on the town or whatever. But mine, like I would picture that like sitting at home on a Saturday afternoon, not much to do, just chilling.
Or even a Saturday morning.
And
Out on the porch.
so yours is a close second in my mind, but I'm choosing my cocktail not because I made it, but because I honestly feel like it was the best one to me.
We can all be self-serving assholes. I think that's what we should really ask ourselves. How do we be better self-serving assholes? No, I think these are all great. And the cocktails really are more a reflection on us. It's our tastes. Again, the Cynar Manhattan is certainly, it has a lot going on. If you want a very bold cocktail, I think you'll probably like that a lot. I think in this case, the only thing that really hurt it for me was I feel like the high proof rye we used in there was maybe a little bit too much for it, but it's a very good cocktail. Mine was the only one that I felt kind of fell flat, but again, it wasn't the cocktail's fault. But
Some people might really like that. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean somebody else wouldn't like it.
And don't like it's probably too strong.
All right, so that's our Amari tasting. We'll probably do another one of these, I think, at some point. There is a lot of Amaros out there. Amari, we didn't say this before, we should say it now. Amari is the plural of Amaro. We will probably taste more Amari at some point. Again, Amari are very nebulous as far as a classification of cocktails, so there's a lot of Amari out there.
And traditionally Italian?
Traditionally Italian, although definitely not always. Why don't you put down in the comments what Amaro you like, what you prefer in your Black Manhattan or your Cynar Manhattan or any other kind of Manhattan or Negroni or any other Amaro cocktail. And be sure to like and subscribe, and we want to thank you for watching.